So in our last video here on secondary data analysis, we want to talk about the advantages and limitations of secondary data. So one of the advantages of using secondary data is to clarify or redefine the research problem. So we talked about in our process flow in terms of the whole research process, we talked about exploratory analysis early on to help us clarify or redefine the problem, understanding really what's at issue, understanding the additional context, the environment in which a decision is made, what other people have done. So for example, we could look at what has happened in the past. If we are, let's say, a post-secondary institution, we're looking at what happens to spending on education. Well, in the past, when there's a recession and people have less income, the government cuts funding on education at the same time. So we can see what has happened in the past and we can help inform decisions and even research in the future. If we are let's say we're a coffee shop, we're Tim Hortons, and we know we're a coffee shop next to the business school. We know that when school is in session, we have a lot more customers, and when it's not, we don't. So we can collect information. We can use that secondary data to help us understand the context in which we're making decisions for our organization, the environment, the economics, the politics for that. So we clarify or redefine the problem during exploratory research. Okay. We can use secondary data to provide a solution to the problem. So we don't need a full-blown research design and process if that information already exists. If we as a academic institution are trying to decide, we're trying to make a decision about which new programs to offer, we could look at what programs do other people offer. We could look at what jobs there are in our region. That data is available and that can provide a solution to the question of what new programs we should be adding. We don't have to do a bunch of surveys and interviews. That information already exists. We could use secondary data to provide alternative methods. For our primary research. We're not sure if we should be doing surveys or whether we should be doing interviews, observational research. So we could use secondary data to help us help inform the research methods or research design that is most appropriate for the scenario. So what have other people done in a similar situation? If they are collecting information from a group, is it better to phone them, call them, or phone them, email them, do old snail mail? What's the better way to contact a particular group of people they're more likely to engage in? So we can use secondary data to provide some alternative methods for our primary research. We can use secondary data to alert our researchers to potential challenges. So for example, what we might learn through secondary data analysis is that the particular group we are trying to study, so we're trying to find out information from young people, people at 18 to 25. Well, the problem with people from 18 to 25 is that they won't answer the phone if you try to call them and they don't recognize the number. So doing surveys over the phone aren't going to work. Trying to get them to participate in focus groups, they're not willing to give up that time. It's hard to solicit information from this particular group. And so we would know that based on the experiences of others. We learned that in our secondary data. And that tells us that we have particular challenges we need to overcome. So we could then look at what are some potential incentives to get this particular group to engage. Number 5, we could use our secondary data to provide necessary background information. So this is going to lend credibility to our research project, get some additional information about the population of interest. What else do we know about the particular group of people we're interested in? And so this just adds that credence to our final research report that we then have this additional information to combine with the primary data we collect. And finally, we can... the advantage of secondary data is that it can provide us with what we call a sample frame. That is a customer list that we can sample from. Doesn't have to be customers, but a list of individuals that we can sample from. So we might be able to, from secondary data, we might be able to buy from another source a list of participants that we could then contact to get information from. That's a sample frame, a group that could be, that you could pull your sample from. And so others can collect that, other research firms put those together, and so we could collect that to help expedite our process. Okay. There are limitations to secondary data we need to be aware of. That is the availability. It is quite possible that no one else has collected the type of data or information that you need. And even if they have collected data, it is quite possible that it's not relevant. You need to know about the value of, let's say, having a polytechnic. So Red Deer Polytechnic used to be Red Deer College. When it converts from being a college to a polytechnic, we want to look at what is the value of that conversion to a polytechnic in central Alberta. Well, we know the conversion of other colleges to polytechnics in bigger places like Calgary and Edmonton, but if we're the first smaller town, or we're smaller city, large town, to convert from a college to a polytechnic in Alberta, then that data isn't relevant. The data that we have about these conversions and transitions in bigger cities may not be relevant. And so, yes, there's some data available, but it isn't quite the same situation. So one of the challenges with secondary data is that it might not be quite the situation you're looking at, and you have to consider whether it's close enough to extrapolate or whether or not you need to create your own. We tend to want to create our own, but it is very time consuming, very expensive. So if you can make existing data work, that's going to be a lot more efficient and cost effective. All right, so let's say we have it available to us. Let's say it's relevant, but how accurate is it? So one of the challenges is who gathered the information? What was the information gathered for? When was it collected? How was it collected? Is it consistent with what other people have found? You know, one of the challenges of using other people's data is that you don't have all the details about how they collected the information. Maybe you don't have the original questions and exactly how they're worded. You just have the data, the summaries at the end. So not having all the minute details about the process and about the research tools may mean that information is not as accurate as you would like. So you have to really fully explore who gathered the information, what information was gathered, when was it collected, how was it collected, is it consistent with what others have found, to know whether or not you want to use their data as your own. And then we have the issue of sufficiency. Of course, the challenge with other people creating research tools is they didn't ask all the questions you would ask. They didn't collect all the data that you would collect. And so does the data go deep enough for you to make the decisions or resolve the problems that you have? So you need to make sure that it is sufficient, Going back to that management decision problem, what is it they are trying to do? What decision is being made? What actions will be taken based on this data? And then looking at, if you use data from others, will you be able to make that decision? Will you be able to act on the information that you have? So we first look at, can we use secondary data either to supplement the research process, to help inform what methods we should be using, to help provide context to the research problem, or can we use it entirely so that we don't have to actually do all the data collection? We can collect data in its raw form. We can collect data in its analyzed form from other entities. We can collect data already within our institution to help expedite and do some of that process. If we don't have any of that and we have to create our own, then we're going to need to create focus groups, interviews, experiments. We're going to have to develop those ourselves, whether we have data from an external database or whether it's our own that we've collected this process. We'll have to analyze it. And so we're going to be going through how to do that in all our future videos.